Do I have an agenda, or do we just open?
Whatever agenda I emailed you.
I didn't
You don't
print
have
it.
your
It's kind of
email
hard to print
on there.
off my phone.
No, so you don't have a physical one.
Just give you a bad time. Okay, I guess we'll call it to order since I'm already late. And you said there's no minutes, right?
Yeah, Helen is out, and I don't know how to log on to her computer. We can postpone election of officers until later if you want.
That would probably be good. I don't want to get in a fight with Jenny about which one of us is going to have to do what.
That's what I was just getting ready to say.
Well, and you
You're gonna
might,
be president
you
again,
might want to
aren't you?
wait
No, I'll
until
be
you
vice
have.
president. I will not be president.
Dennis will have to be then.
We're-
Or you can wait until you have.
We're discussing
We'll
this.
wait till we get some more members.
Yep.
Yeah. hey, we
Either
can
Bill
do
or
that.
Trinity can be president.
So you have, it's a Peaceful Hilltop minor, subsequent, or Peaceful Hilltop subsequent minor that you need to set a public hearing on. The deadline for action on that one is March 16th.
I bought little calendars that I have with me here and forgot it.
Yeah, this one is down south off of Price Road in existing Antelope Vista 2 subdivision. He's got a 40-plus acre parcel that he's splitting into two off of Prospect Hill Road.
So the
Kind of lays
soonest,
between Price Hill and Hilltop.
Up by where the horses are?
Yeah, that's kind of the backside of the property off of Hilltop.
the soonest date for a public hearing is February 3rd. But that's the first Wednesday of the month. Goodness. February 10th, I am unavailable. I already have a meeting scheduled for that day,
Okay, is
in the
that on
afternoon.
Wednesday?
That is a Wednesday. So either February 3rd or 17th, if you want to stick with a Wednesday.
I'll let you decide, however you guys work in person.
Doesn't make any difference. I was actually gonna pose part of that question to Jerry, is if we ask him questions today, what his schedule is, if he needs, how much time he needs to
Do you
get
want to
back to
pull
me.
that microphone a little closer or bend them towards you so he can hear your questions?
Got it pointed at me?
Well, you know, at least in your general
No,
direction.
I didn't know if, I can see his picture.
Yeah.
Jerry, how much time do you need if we ask you questions out of all of this stuff we're doing on the regs to do your work along with all your other work? Just allowing that if we set a hearing, that we've allowed enough time so we can have another meeting with you at the same time?
I'm flexible, Herb. I mean, February 3rd or February 17th, whatever works for you, so.
Okay.
And in all honesty, I mean, things, if there was a good time to have stuff thrown at me, it's right now, so.
Okay. 17 sound good enough? Does that leave you enough time to do everything you gotta do?
Mhm. Oh, yeah, I'll just, the staff report I'll need to write. And I can
Okay.
have that done by February 3rd. And then that way you also have enough time to have another meeting to make a decision if you choose to, instead of making your recommendation.
Yeah,
And it gives the commissioners still plenty of time to.
okay.
So February 3rd,
Mm-hmm.
what time would you like to shoot for?
I like the 2 o'clock. Do you like it, or?
Doesn't make any difference, at least we don't have to hurry.
Right.
Oh no, I lied to you. I forgot that it has to be 14 days from posting, and it won't post until the 22nd. Shoot.
So what's
So the
our-
soonest we could have a meeting would be February 5th, and that's a Friday. So that
And you
won't
said
work.
the 10th was out, what about that
Yeah.
next week? Is it just the 10th is out, or is
Yeah,
it?
the 10th is a Wednesday, and I am booked for the whole day. But the 17th, there is availability. I mean, if we wanted to stick to a Wednesday schedule.
Okay, well, I'd say either the 17th, or if you can find a day during that week of the 10th, that's up to you.
We could do the 11th. I just have meetings all day on the 10th.
Fridays don't seem
No,
to work all
Friday's
that
probably
well.
not a good idea.
Actually, the earlier the better for me, so,
What about Thursday, February 11th then?
okay.
Okay.
Two o'clock?
I forgot with the, 2 o'clock with the Friday posting. It's been that way forever. I just.
Now, can that
Still
work for
thinking
both of them? You told me on the phone that we had to have a hearing for both.
Yeah, we certainly can do both. All right, so let's set the one for Peaceful Hilltop Minor, February 11th, 2021 at 2 p.m. in this room. And then if we move on to the next order of business for Dry Gulch Acres, it's a subsequent subdivision also. Would you like to hold a public hearing on the same day at, say, 2:30?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So 2/11/21 at 2:30 in this room. And then Jerry, we'll plan on having our regular business meeting just after the public hearings.
Is this one right up behind the transfer station where that other subdivision
It
was a
is,
few
yeah.
years ago?
Do you know where Sam Good lives? There, Sam Good? There. Anyway,
Well, I
He bought
remember
one of the
looking at
lots.
subdivision up there next to it. I just figured if there was, and I see
Yeah,
it's right
Brad
along.
Campbell is the original subdivision around the transfer station. I believe they're doing this for their daughter, but
That's
they can't
correct.
do a family transfer because it's a subdivision lot. So,
their daughter and their son, so they bought the lot next to Simone, and her brother essentially bought the lot next to Sam. And they want to split it in half so they each can have a part of it. It is really bad out there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other, I'm not the president, but just so you know, because you don't have the agenda in front of you,
Okay.
those are the only two items. Other than the subdivision regulations. That door is probably blowing open, isn't it?
Listen, look at that one.
That's the biggest problem I have with these masks is hearing people.
Yeah.
Right.
Scaring people. He's afraid of scaring people. Jerry's lucky he's here without a mask.
Well, I'm the only one in this little conference room.
I mean, he's got earphones and no mask. so.
Right, it's kind of nice. Okay, so was that it for for setting these Obviously, we'll have more discussions as we move further. Thank you. Our door keeps blowing open in the entryway. So we had to lock it, but. Here's the rest of my paperwork. All right, whenever you're ready. Don't wait on me.
Okay. I'm not sure where,
How you wanna keep moving forward? I know Herb and I chatted a little bit on the phone. You wanna go back through the template, you have another approach, and then I also sent out those examples of design and improvement standards, just to give you a sense of what some of your neighbors are doing in other counties that are kind of the same size.
yeah. Did you get a chance to read all those, Jimmy?
Yes, sir.
I figured you did.
And it's not quite as full as this one, but pretty close.
Well, there's several of them in there. I just quit reading about 2/3 of the way through, and I said, not for me. But I did find things that I liked in Gallatin's counties.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, in 2012, we used Gallatin's and went through them, and that's what we used in 2012.
Madison,
No, Gallatin. I thought it was Gallatin.
I thought we used Madison.
No, I remember some from Madison. I don't remember.
I got
all.
Madison's here too.
And the question for Nicole, did you read the supplements? Because what I could see of the supplements on Richland is everything that you wanted.
Well,
It's all your checklists.
yeah, on Richland's supplements,
Mm-hmm.
I looked at, let me move this down here. Gallatin's road impact fee regulation, and I guess I had some questions on that. On how do they have impact fees? How are they allowed to have impact fees? Because I really like it.
I remember it was controversial when they did it, but it somehow got through.
Okay.
That'd be a question for Jerry. The only thing I could think of is that the impact fee might be because of the fact that they're a form of government,
Oh.
because they have charter government. So they can do things we can't do.
So, Nicole, are you looking at the design and improvement standards, section 7 for Gallatin County Transportation?
I'm looking at Appendix E, road impact fee regulation. And not because I want to implement an impact fee, but because we struggle with this proportionate share of road improvements on every subdivision. So it would be nice to have, didn't highlight this.
To be honest with you,
We
I
have a
got so
formula
excited
here.
when I saw the formula that I didn't really pay that much attention
Right.
to the rest of it.
Now, this is Gallatin.
On
Which
E-
page is that on?
E5.
E5?
Mhm.
Well, that's in Gallatin.
Yep.
I thought you were talking
I
about
got Gallatin.
Lewis and
but I
Clark.
don't have any E5. Maybe that's it.
So, the only thing I mailed out to the board was just the design and improvement standards. I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
send you the entire document, only because you'd have had, like, if I'd have done that for every one of them, you'd have 2,000 pages of paper to go through.
Yeah, no, I just pulled this off of their website. So yeah, if you
That's
don't
what
have
I don't
if you don't
have.
have the whole document, you wouldn't have it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't, quite frankly, I didn't find anything in Gallatin that I really felt like we wanted to adopt. In theirs or Carbon's, either one. The one that I liked was in Lewis and Clark was the road formula.
I didn't do the road formula on because I don't know what kind of dirt they use. But Lewis and Clark I like the least of their regs.
Yeah. The thing, when I talked to Jerry, I called him, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago after we started reading this stuff, was that just the fact that It has not been tested in court, but everybody, from what Jerry tells me, at least in Lewis and Clark, subdividers, county, everybody's happy with it. It's the result of a court case. So that's probably as close as we can get to something that is quote unquote either case law, MCA, or whatever. Is that a true statement?
That is, the county, based upon the litigation with Jerry Christensen and Jerry Hamlin, two separate court cases, which I believe ended up costing the county, oh my gosh, $650,000 or $750,000 in damages. These road calculations as a proportional share were kind of the results of that court case. And as Herb and I chatted, it hasn't been tested in court, but on the flip side, I talked to a lot of developers, and now that it's a proportional share for the external roads, internal roads are still the subdivider's responsibility, but those external roads that access into the subdivision, now that it's a proportional share, boy, I'm just not hearing any heartburn at all. So again, it hasn't been tested in court, but the fact that you're not hearing complaints anymore in Lewis and Clark County says a lot, because if there was one issue that used to make the development community really angry, other than fire protection water supplies, it was the roads.
That was their problem. Remember when Jeannie Steele said that the thing we needed to upgrade the most was the road issue, and that's true. Then the other thing, we can get back to that, or you tell me to slow down or whatever.
No, jump right in there. I mean, it's,
Oh, no, go for it. You start wherever you think you want to start, Jeannie. You tell me.
Okay. The one thing I absolutely, unequivocally do not like is the 2,000 feet and 20 feet, and 1,000 feet and 10 feet water away from waterways.
Oh, you mean the setbacks?
Yes.
You don't have to adopt that if you don't want to. So you can pick and choose from any set of subdivision regulations, whether it's road standards, it's stormwater. As long as you're meeting the intent of the statute, you have the flexibility to pick and choose. If you decide you don't want riparian or water body setbacks, you don't have to do that.
I think we can continue on with the 100-year floodplain situation as we have been using.
Right?
Because otherwise, everybody that does a survey has to have a flood study. That's it. I did the whole county. Where's the camera?
Right in front of you on that podium.
Okay.
Yep.
As far as the people who would have to have a study, like Ray Creek, you couldn't have built a house up there. Deep Creek, you can't build a house going up the road. You couldn't have. Toston, some places you couldn't build anywhere. And so when I did them, and this here, I have to admit, I didn't do this. The 25 square mile situation on it, to get an idea of what it even is. It's that big in the county, the orange part. And it really is a hindrance. And our job isn't to be a hindrance, our job's to guide.
Right? Yeah, no, you are under no obligation to adopt water body setback. That was a decision that the Lewis and Clark County Planning Board and then ultimately the Commission decided to use.
And Carbon County did too.
Yep. Powell County has it, but that's an optional thing.
Okay. Anything else you have, Herb?
well, that was one of the questions, that if there was some requirement in FEMA, because the only way I'd go along with it would be if it was a FEMA requirement to protect the county, and as long as FEMA is limited to the 100-year floodplain that we're using now, we know we've got issues with that, but there's certainly no reason to go in there and make it any worse.
Right. Yeah, no, all the county is required to follow are the adopted flood insurance rate maps and the county floodplain regulations. And then again, I mean, with a subdivision, if you have an instance where you're pretty certain that there's been flooding on the property, but it's not mapped, you would have the discretion to require that type of analysis. Again, that's on a case-by-case basis. If it's a high and dry wheat field and everybody's like, if that floods, we're all in trouble, well, then it's not an issue. If you're in a drainage where the property, there's some evidence that the property's been underwater, that's a completely different story. But that's discretionary up to the planning board, ultimately the commissioners, with the language regarding floodplains. Whereas water body setbacks, riparian setbacks, while yes, they probably do have a public health and safety component, I would argue it's more wildlife, water quality, that sort of issues.
I can go with that.
You know, as long as they've got the option and we don't need to include it, all I want to do is meet the law. Bill?
Can I ask a quick question? Does a HEXRAS study supersede a FEMA study?
Or
So
what's,
HECRAS is one of the studies that's used to like do a floodplain analysis. So let's say, I think this is just good conversation. For areas that don't have detailed floodplain mapping, meaning you've got elevations, you've got the floodway identified, but are what we call approximate zone A's, meaning it's just this blob on the map that was adopted, and there's been no detailed analysis. If someone wants to do a project in an approximate A zone of an adopted flood insurance rate map, they have to do an encroachment analysis. And essentially, they have to do a HECRAS study as part of that. So HECRAS only comes into play when you have designated floodplains, whether it's an approximate or a detailed flood study. Does that make sense?
well, kind of, but I think I know where Bill's coming from.
Yeah, it costs me 10
Which
grand.
one trumps the other? If you have this HECRAS, whatever you're calling it, study, does that trump FEMA once it's approved? The 100-year floodplain map?
Yeah, it only trumps FEMA once it goes through a review process to do a letter of map revision or a letter of map amendment or CLOMER. There's all these jargons, but the HECRAS doesn't trump a firm flood insurance rate map or a flood study until it goes through a review process with DNRC and FEMA.
That's a scary thought.
You can spend the money, but you've got to have it reviewed and approved by DNRC and FEMA.
Three Forks had a complete flood study done. Because I think we might have done that.
Yeah. Did that answer
If I'm
your,
not mistaken, they found out large parts of the city, more of the cities in the quote-unquote floodplain than they thought, based upon surveying and engineering.
mhm.
But yeah, no, it's no joke. I mean, I've been serving as the floodplain administrator in Powell County, because their planner left last February, and because of COVID, they had a heck of a time hiring somebody. And we've had people call and say, hey, I'm looking at this piece of ground along the Clark Fork, what can I do? And there are large sections of the Clark Fork River that have designated floodplains, but there are approximate A zones, meaning there were never detailed studies. And to do anything in those approximate areas, you've got to do a full-blown encroachment analysis, which, as it sounds like whoever's in the audience pointed out, they're expensive. They're not cheap.
Yeah, the way they got done was back in Virginia, somebody just seen a river map and just started drawing lines. And that's how it was approved years ago.
Yeah, or they looked at an aerial photograph from a flood in 1972 and they drew lines.
Drew lines.
Did that answer your question, Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that, in my mind, we can't do anything about FEMA, But if there was something out there that could be done that would actually trump FEMA would be there, because you know how I feel about the 100-year floodplain maps. So,
I had one thing on the Lewis and Clark subdivision. I don't see page number down there. It's on improvements and road area. Because we have a situation here, is a road in a subdivision, is it a public road, is it a county road, is it a whatever? And in their improvements,
what page are you on, Jenny?
there is no number here.
Oh, I
Is
am,
it section I?
I, yes, I.
okay.
All roads within subdivisions shall be dedicated as county roads, except mobile home and recreational vehicle parks. A subdivider must provide proof that all easements are county road easements. I didn't know if that would help or hinder us.
I think it would be a hindrance, and I do not believe our county commissioners would accept them.
Well, we don't have them as county roads, they
Right.
were dedicated.
Right, and I think that's because commission preference, that they will not accept them as county roads.
But they don't have to maintain them even if they do accept them.
Correct.
Right, and if I'm not mistaken, Lewis and Clark County, they define their definition of a county road now, for the purposes of subdivisions, is a public access easement, because Lewis and Clark County doesn't accept roads either, so they're done taking on roads. So I suspect that's a bit confusing, and that's one thing we probably want to clean up in their regs. But I know Lewis and Clark County isn't accepting any new roads. They can't take care of the ones they have. So my advice would be is that at least we want them to be public access easements so that no one can put fences up. You can make sure UPS, mail, fire, ambulance, whoever can get to the property, but it's not the responsibility of the county to maintain those roads. It's more of a legal issue than anything else. And the other thing is if you go ever, and Herb and I chatted about rural improvement districts a little bit, you can't create a rural improvement district for a private road. It has to be a public or county road to create a rural improvement district. So that's another thing to be careful of. Is you may not be looking at RIDs right now, but in the future, unless the law changes, you can't create an RID for a true private road.
Looks like right now, roads are required to be dedicated to public use forever in a subdivision. And and I think we put a thing right on the plat that says they're dedicated for the public use forever, but the county does not accept them as a county road.
I think that's in one of these.
Right. And I think we want to continue doing that. I don't know why we would consider changing.
I wouldn't either.
I just want to say I love every bit of the Richland County supplements. So there's nothing in here that I did not like.
Well, just to reiterate, I mean, Karen Pugh, who's the land use attorney for the Montana Association of Counties, worked pretty closely with Richland County when they did this, so I suspect it's pretty thorough.
Yes. I am a big fan of checklists and forms and anything that we can give the developer, because yes, they do want the subdivision regulations, or their representative would want the subdivision regulations, but it's so overwhelming when someone comes in and says, okay, well, I want to do a subdivision, what do I need to do? I don't want to throw the book at them and say, okay, well, here's the regulations, good luck. So I love that they have put together this, these supplements, because that's what we're using now. We're using condensed versions of the regulations, in a sense, to give them a checklist. Here's the checklist of everything you need, so then we can go in and talk more specifically about what that means. So if you have an item number 6, well, let's talk about what 6 looks like. Where are you going to get that information? I love that they have the forms in here. You submit the form to the fire department, you submit a form to the sheriff's office, you submit a form to the ambulance service, I think I saw in here. So instead of just contacting the agency, we say, here's the form for you to use to contact that agency. You don't just have to go and send an email and wing it. So it's then consistent for every development.
I thought that would please you once
does,
you
immensely.
looked at it, because you had all your checklists, and that
Yes.
was the last thing I went through. A question for you, Jerry, is this supplement, or is it titled supplement? Does that have anything different, like when we had to do with the weeds? Does that have to go through the full public hearing review, or can something in the supplement be changed by the commissioners?
So that's a good question, Herb. My advice, and I suspect Kara, you, and other land use folks would recommend that you do not formally adopt the supplements as regulations. They are simply accompanying documents. The actual regulations would be adopted formally, and then the supplements could be adopted, like a fee schedule. The supplements should be adopted, certainly by resolution by the commissioners, but not following the statutory process and the regulations, because if Nicole or the board decides you want to make changes to better suit your needs, then you got to go through, you have to follow the subdivision update process, versus if the supplements are wrong and you as a board agrees by consensus working with Nicole, we need to fix this. It's just much cleaner to leave all of your forms out of the regulatory process.
Okay, that was the way I took it, that was the intent.
Yeah.
Just based on like what the weed board had done, and we had to go through the whole hearing process just to let the weed board review what they wanted to do. Well, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. The cleaner we can keep it, as long as we can refer them to those, the most current version of those supplements in the standards that we recommend for adoption. That's kind of a win-win situation as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed.
Now, one thing that I would recommend is if you decide to go that route, when you do make changes, because you will make changes to forms and checklists, is, try to keep it formal, as Richland County did, and insert cover memos or memos inside saying, on January 13th of 2022, the planning board, at the request of planning staff, changed X forms, just so there's a tracking process. Because that's the only trouble is that changes will get made, and if you don't document them, it can get confusing, Staff leaves, planning board changes, just some continuity is really good.
Yeah. No, that sounds like we're getting closer to being all on the same page, but while we're in Lewis and Clark, I've got a couple of questions, kind of like what we went through before on the phone. You told me some of them were case law. I'm looking for the, okay, we already talked about that. Under lots on F on Lewis and Clark, and I've seen it, I'm not even sure if we've got it in ours, but it's in Richland's and it's in several other ones. What's the reason behind corner lots having driveway access off of the same street or road? Particularly if that corner lot fronts two subdivision roads. What difference does it make which one they go to?
Yeah, I think, Herb, this is a carryover from the fact that everybody's subdivision regulations to some extent in the state are based upon the old model subdivision regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of a municipal standard, I think, more than anything else. You know, if you're not comfortable with this, and you don't see any point in it, you could delete it, or you could say, you know, as appropriate or applicable
Yeah.
in that sort of section.
Well, the only problem I have there is the shall, and that's the reason for a question, is it legal? You can say may, you know, any other number of words, but it doesn't really, to me, doesn't particularly apply to what we're trying to do.
Well, in this case, if you're in Lewis and Clark County and you don't design a subdivision, and let's say you decide you don't want to meet that standard, in Lewis and Clark County, I suspect you're gonna have to request a variance from the design standard as part of your subdivision application. So, I mean, so because it does say shall, that would theoretically be the case in Lewis and Clark County.
Okay. Dropping down one more, and this is one that I do like, on 6, says lots shall be designed with sufficient non-buildable easements to provide adequate visibility for traffic safety as determined by planning staff.
Right?
There's no legal questions with that, because the comment that I wrote alongside of it was amen.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, because let's say you have two corner lot, you have a new road coming out to, let's say, a county road, for lack of a better term, you have two corner lots. The last thing you want to do is have someone put their houses as far up to the property line, up to the right-of-way per se, that you could impede site visibility at that intersection.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's a perfectly defensible standard, which you probably won't use very much, because most people aren't gonna wanna put their houses that close to an intersection, but it could address those sorts of issues that site visibility at intersections is probably the big issue with, you know, buildings, whether it's a garage, a building or whatnot.
Okay. I actually wasn't thinking of it. I go back and look at it, and what you're explaining is exactly right. Is there any way to expand that to get it for driveway visibility? Because I can think of numerous subdivisions and driveways where you have very limited visibility, both by the positioning of the driveway and by the grading of the driveway. They've actually graded them into cuts, and it's very difficult to see.
So in that case, if you've got a lot that, let's say just the access is poor, but meaning that's steep, and there's gonna need to be a lot of cut and fill to put the driveway in, but there's a decent buildable site, but there's a site distance issue with particular locations on the lot or a driveway, you could do a no-build easement along certain sections of the lot, get it on the plat, and say, okay, if we're gonna put a driveway in, it's gotta be over in these areas. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Well, kind of, as opposed to what I would think of as a normal no-build, it would be no access or no ingress, egress type situation would be the language, but that would still be legal if we put it in there. Because I'm looking at the liability down the road. I'm thinking of when I have driven by lots that were being graded, where they were putting the driveways in, and I've seen the crew 2 hills back, but the visibility was such that had I not been prepared to stop, and the guy backs the tractor right straight out in front of me, and you've got about 100 feet to slam on the brakes, but I was only going about 15 miles an hour because I knew he was there anyway. But it'd be nice to be able to look at it. It's not going to apply on 80% of them.
Right.
It's just wherever it does apply, when people are building back in the hills, that it would be nice to say, no, this is a public safety issue. You know, it's not like we're taking something from them. We're just trying to avoid the liability coming back 20 years from now when somebody T-bones and gets seriously injured. They say, well, the county approved it, so they're going to include the county in a lawsuit.
Yep.
So, okay.
So Lewis and Clark and Gallatin have been using those no access restrictions, no access easements for years. And I mean, if there's a true public health and safety issue, it's probably something that's pretty, I mean, as long as you can make the rational connection between public health and safety, and they can still build a driveway and get to the lot, and it's not onerous, I think they're absolutely fine.
Okay.
And number 7, no lot shall have an average length greater than 3 times, and they have shall instead of may, because we do have variances on that.
So Jenny, my only concern would be is may, because it's permissive, you might as well just take it out, because it really isn't a regulation. So if you'd rather not deal with that particular issue, I would just take it out, because really, once you say may, it doesn't have any, the subdivider can say, it says may, not shall.
I think we've already got that in ours, don't we?
Yes.
Well, yes, but if
we
we're
do.
going to be redoing it. that's-
I'm just trying to pick out the things that I do like to make sure that it's legal for us to include them as opposed to trying to pick theirs apart.
Right.
Number 10, I like that they have may in there, because Ray Creek, the government may require designation of building sites, building envelopes, building setbacks, or building restrictions to avoid the development of the topographical, the hill. Rolling and hilly terrain. If they didn't have that in there, no houses would have been built up Ray Creek. Some up Deep Creek.
Yeah, there's things in there that, like, another one that I liked, and it's just, I can't really think of an example, but I've got it right now on River Road. Maintaining level of service, the next one over, under adjacent, next page over, adjacent and offsite improvements, under streets and roads. Has there been any legal trials on that? Where, what I'm thinking of is you can have, even though we take these 1-lot splits or 2 lots and everything else, there's been a house a year built on River Road for more than a house a year for the last 20 plus years. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that the roads impact has been pretty severe over that amount of time. What I'm looking for is something that the commission can at some point in time say, okay, this is evidence that we need a rural improvement district, and use that same proportionate map based on whatever the time frame is. I don't have a particular place that could use it. I just see it happening, and it looks awful good at first blush, but is it defensible?
Yeah, level of service standards have been around for decades and decades. What we call the ITE, the International Traffic Engineers Manual, it's this god-awful, ugly green book. Actually, I think they're black or gray now. For every use, every use in the country, ranging from heavy industry all the way down to recreation, they have calculated traffic generation, and those numbers are used to determine the levels of service for different roads around the country. So levels of service, as long as they follow established engineering practices, are perfectly defensible. And one of the reasons Lewis and Clark included this in here is because of their road standards that now require a proportional share for payment for off-site road impacts. And, you know, the more I think about it, one of the things that might be useful for the planning board is just to give you get a couple of staff reports from some big projects in Lewis and Clark, new staff reports, because then you can see how that language is implemented, as far as levels of service and how it ties back to traffic counts, and then really ultimately, what does the developer have to pay for their proportionate share? So there's this linear connection from levels of surface traffic generation and what is happening on a road, and then what impact the subdivision is going to have. That ties back to how much the developer has to pay to help eventually upgrade the road. They're only paying for part of their impact to the road.
Well, two parts of the question then would be, first of all, if we decided to put something like that in, wouldn't it be wise to include a reference to the national manual that you're talking about?
Yeah, or, you know, establish accepted engineering practices, whatever the board is comfortable with.
Well, the more specific you can be, if there's already a national book, if you will, out there that has taken all of that into effect, you can always apply for a variance from something, but the idea being is that you would have a legal reference, and it takes the he said, she said out of it in my mind, because now it's nationwide. You don't have to like it, but if it's applied uniformly, that's the way it is.
It's not telling somebody they can't do something, or they just can get a variance, or how is that working?
I'm not sure. I just know I like what's here. You know, that's what we need, you know. If we can work it out together, Jerry's got words of wisdoms, but the idea, I see it coming into play more down the road. Yes, it could be used for subdivisions, but along roads where people are selling off pivot corners and they're doing this, and all of a sudden now we have 4 miles of county maintained road that we've put 10 more lots on.
And we shouldn't tell them they can't do that?
I'm not saying we should tell them that they can't do that. I'm saying that at some point in time, when it becomes so expensive for the county, that the county should be able to put in an RID, and those people pay proportionate to what was there.
I can see RIDs, but I don't like the idea that perhaps I can tell you can't sell a lot where you're.
No, I'm not trying to prevent the lot. I'm trying to come up with a vehicle to where the county, so that you and I aren't paying for each one of those aggregate lots out there. They get to pay, you know, it's probably a poor example, but I'm going to say it, you know, maybe there's 1 or 2 houses serviced now. And over a 10 or 20 year span, there's another 20 houses built.
Which likely will be.
Mm-hmm. Should everybody in the county pay for the upgrade on the road, or should the people over there pay 80% of fixing their portion of the road from wherever the 2 original places were? That's what I'm trying to come up with. It's not trying to limit the development, it's trying to define the assessment of who's going to pay.
Yeah, I think where Herb's going, Janie, is he just wants to make sure there's a mechanism that the new development pays a proportional share of those road costs, so that it isn't the general taxpayer who has to eventually upgrade the road. And that's what happened in Lewis and Clark County is, to be quite honest, the county would just dump everything on the new developer and say, well, Lake Helena Drive doesn't meet county standards. We're not, if you want to do your subdivision, guess what? You're going to spend $1.5 million to upgrade that road. Well, that's not legally defensible. That's a taking of property rights. And what they now do is that same project, a traffic engineer would look at Lake Helena Drive and say, it's at level service X, whatever, B, C, D, and your 10 lots are gonna generate 800 vehicle trips per day. It's gonna lower the level of service to whatever X. And what you should do is you need to pay X percentage of the eventual road construction cost per lot, $50, $100, $10,000, rather than what they were doing before is just saying, you're gonna pay for it all. You pay your proportional share based on the lot number. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, part of mine is based on research that I did when they set up an RID on River Road. How long has that been? 10 years ago?
Oh, yeah, at least.
And it was for nothing more than mag chloride through all the houses where they're pretty dense. But if you read the RIDs, and I have built RIDs, if you read the statute, if it is not specifically set up, at that point in time, there was 14 miles of road. There were 5 property owners. Yeah. Total of 5 houses, 3 property owners, if you will, on River Road that were not on that particular stretch. The percentage wasn't great enough. We couldn't have stopped it if they had wanted to come through. If the county tried to cram an RID down 14 miles of River Road, we'd have been stuck paying for that because the percentage by law, if it's less than 40% or 60%, I don't remember now, but the situation was the best that we could hope for was to stall it 1 year. That was MCA, and then they were going to do it. Thankfully, that's not what they were looking for, and it didn't come through. If we've got something somewhere, whether it's this or somehow the incorporation of the road formula, yeah, that road's been there for X number of years. There's been X number of houses on it. But if you build 100 houses up there, but I own 80% of the ground, why should I pay 80% of the cost for those 100 houses? And that's where MCA is not very specific, or at least they weren't in the past when we did this.
Right. So, I mean, only because I'm very familiar with it. To do an RID, and again, not patting Lewis and Clark County on the back, they've done plenty of stuff that isn't good, but when, like, Lewis and Clark or Jefferson County approaches the JEFCO now, creating a rural improvement district, there's a pretty rigid process to identify benefiting properties, so that the large ag owner, who they may own 80% of the frontage on the road, isn't bearing any more burden than what they proportionally should share if they only have one house versus, say, 20 to 100 homes that are on that road. So for RIDs, I think that's the critical thing, is that accurately defining what the benefiting property is and to what extent they benefit. A homeowner benefits far more than a guy that's got 100 acres of alfalfa. He's driving his tractor across the road every once in a while. So, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, Herb. rural improvement districts have to be handled in a very detailed manner so that.
Yeah, you have to have a lot of attention to detail, and if we have something somewhere that the county's adopted, at least we've got the basis for assessing that percentage. Even that may not be the exact thing, but it's exactly the same thing I'm talking about, is running a tractor up and down the road 3 months out of the year, once a week, as opposed to, your impact on the roads as to what happens when somebody else moves in, and if it's nothing more than UPS coming to their residence once a day.
Okay.
That's a major impact when you,
Didn't we have that when we had going out to the nursing home, they had to pay 55% or something?
That's where we have the 50ths. We use the 1/50th per lot calculation. But I would like to, through this process, come up with a better formulation for proportionate share, because currently we do 1/50th per lot, and that's based on 8 vehicle trips per day per residential unit at a number 1 local road can handle up to 400 vehicle trips per day. So obviously 8 into 400, we come up with 50. So we get 1/50th per lot is their proportionate share. But I would like to come up with a better formula if we could. And that was actually, we formulated that with assistance by Susan Swimley when she was assisting Tara as the Mako land use attorney. We came up with that 1/50th. So if you have a better, if there's a better formula out there, I want to use that and get that into our regulations, into this regulation. I don't have the Lewis and Clark. I only have Richland here in front of me. So maybe it is in here and I just haven't seen it. Another thing that I would like to potentially discuss or look at doing is, and this has come through discussions with the commissioners, is creating an RID at the time of recordation of the subdivision plat. Do you know of any other counties that are doing this? Have they been successful? Is it a really bad idea?
No, Lewis and Clark County, unless I'm mistaken, I think for minor subdivisions, they require a waiver of the right to protest creating an RID, and I believe majors, and I can double check, but major subdivisions, you have to create an RID so that the roads are maintained.
Okay.
Don't we have that?
We have the waiver of the right to protest the creation, but we don't actually force the creation.
Yeah, and I'll double check that, but I know at least the last time I checked, major subdivisions, you had to create an RID. But as Herb and I talked a couple of weeks ago, it's a great tool that the county has to be prepared to administrate them, because, God, I think, don't quote me on this, but Lewis and Clark, the Helena Valley has like 45 or 60 RIDs right now. They have full-time staff. I mean, creating and managing RIDs is a very time-consuming and complex process. They're a great tool to make sure that roads are maintained in subdivisions, but it's something the county needs to be prepared to do versus it's a great idea, let's do it, and then we're like, oh Lord, we've got all these projects we have to manage. So there's an operations and maintenance cost to doing that.
Okay.
How is it doing there? Is it working out by having all of those people, or?
Again, my sense is just talking to everybody. I know friends in the valley that live in RIDs. It's not a perfect process, but they get their snow plowed, they get egg chloride, they get grading, they have asphalt, they're getting chip seals. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than what was happening where roads were just simply falling apart, and the West Valley Fire Department and East Valley were like, we can't even go down these roads anymore. So, it's not perfect, but under our statutory framework, I think it's probably the best tool that counties have for non-county roads maintenance.
So is there something in Lewis and Clark's regulations, because again, going back to my affinity towards the supplements, you know, for the reasons of being able to tell the developer, this is what you need to do. How would I tell them to create an RID? I mean, I don't feel like it's fair to say, okay, this is a condition of approval, you must create an RID. And I'm not saying it very clear probably, but is there a document in Lewis and Clark County that says this is how you do an RID?
Yes,
Okay.
actually, so, Lewis and Clark, I can get this, I'm just writing a note to myself, I'll get the board and you, Nicole, the Lewis and Clark County RID manual.
Okay.
And people around the state use this thing just because they've been doing it for so long. I will send it, I will, get hard copies off to everybody, and then I can also email it. 'Cause
Okay.
It's a pretty straightforward PDF. So you can't just create an RID by yourself, obviously. You've got to work with the county to do that. So you're correct. You can't just simply tell a developer to go out and create an RID, because that's just not the way it works. It's a quasi-governmental entity that operates, that's created through the statutory process. The counties typically manage the funds, but the funds, meaning they do all the financials and whatnot, but it's the actual folks on the RID boards, at least the Lewis and Clark, who decide how they want to spend the money. The county will do generally whatever folks want to do with their money, plow snow, grade, whatever. So typically those decisions are made on the ground with just the financial management happening at the county level.
Okay. And those RID boards, are they administered by the county, or is it similar to an HOA?
So there's a statutory, there's statutory bodies.
Okay.
So I suppose they're like an HOA, but they are defined under statute. And I'm actually trying to find the language in Lewis and Clark's improvement standards, because I'm almost 100% sure it says in here you have to create an RID, but I just haven't found it yet,
Okay.
so. Search.
So that's just something I just wanted to bring up to talk about and see how you felt about it, because I know we do run into that a lot. You know, the end users, when subdivision residents are living in these subdivisions and then they come to the county and say, okay, well, who's going to maintain our roads? You are. That just, I mean, not that we can fix everyone's problems, but I feel like if there's a way that we can help this so these roads don't fall into disrepair because people are not putting forth the money or the effort to you know, stay on top of the maintenance.
Yeah.
I'm going to go look at
My
that.
personal belief is that's a whole other board and a whole other document, because that is extremely time-consuming and needs the public hearing process and the input from what's there, because MCA, as Jerry and I have talked, I mean, I don't have anything against RIDs. I think they're good for the county, but it's how they're administered. And I don't really, personally do not believe that it belongs in the subdivision regs. It's something that should be addressed through the commissioners. I'm talking RIDs specifically now. That somebody comes up with a complete set of ground rules on how they're going to be applied before they do it, because I would be willing to bet that if you ran a canvass of the last 6 to 8 commissioners, probably only half of them could tell you what RID stood for,
That's why
let
they have
alone
us.
how to set one up and what goes into it. And there is a specific process in MCA, and there's even a specific process for a maintenance RID, which
yeah.
I looked at setting up in lieu, had this other thing up there 10 years ago, gone to someplace that was gonna cost me a lot of money. I was looking at what my other options were to be proactive, was to set up a maintenance RID. And at that point in time, there'd only been 3 people that would have had to pay into it. I would have had to take care, well, 10 years ago, I was probably taking care of 10 miles of river road anyway.
No, I'm just thinking, you know, not part of the subdivision regulations because I don't want it to get too convoluted, but as a condition of approval, and then reflect to this. We do have RID, we don't refer to them as regulation, but essentially a guideline for creating an RID that the commissioners adopted several years ago, but I think we could do better. It's not very extensive as far as, you know, explaining the process and what the county is to do and what the landowner is to do. So I was just curious if it was something that we could include. I don't know. I guess maybe it's more of a condition than a subdivision regulation is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it would, to me, that's too general. You'd have to have that option, but I'm not even sure that unless it was a pretty sizable one, that an RID would be the appropriate condition as such.
I just like to give people all of the answers, you know.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, or as many as I possibly can. I realize I can't give them everything, but when they come in and, you know, that's typically they want to know what's required for preliminary, and we get through that, and then, you know, we talk about the different steps, preliminary, planning board recommendation, commissioners, and then final. And so trying to explain final, what those conditions might look like, I just want to make it as explanatory as possible for the actual end user.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
So they're
yeah.
not shocked.
So they're not shocked, exactly.
Yeah.
I want to be open and have people understand what they're getting into. when
I
they
know what
decide
you're
to
coming
develop.
from, and you're the face of the county. It'd be great if you had 2 or 3 pieces of paper that you could hand them and say, your future expenses could range from here to here, depending upon what another property owner does down the line, what one does back in front of you. To a certain extent, maybe that's something you need to talk to the commissioners about, is getting, whether it's Jerry or somebody, to help come up with those parameters. And bearing in mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, but every place I read in MCA, all of the money that goes to the county, it's kind of a two-edged sword. Somebody has to keep track of when all this money's coming in, because there's a 20-year sunset on the money. If it's not used on the road that it is paid for, it has to be returned to whoever it was collected from.
That happened out at Silos. Joe Jepson property.
I don't know where things are, but that anything that is paid in now has a 20-year sunset clause on it.
I think it did back then too.
Okay.
Well, Herb is right. I mean, again, creating the RID, while time-consuming and somewhat expensive, the real cost comes in administration and accounting. Because if you're collecting fee funds through taxes, because that's how it's done, is every district ends up with an additional tax that's collected. That has to be accounted for and has to be spent on that specific RID. So it does take staff and time. Actually, I just quickly looked at Lewis and Clark's website, and they now have 3 full-time staff people. They got a coordinator, construction coordinator, 2 construction coordinators in just their county alone. And it looks like, I'm just looking at the list, they've got over 60 RIDs. So, I mean, it does take resources to do that. The one thing I would throw out is, and completely up to the board, in Lewis and Clark County, they've made RIDs mandatory for subdivisions, including the waiver. Just so you know, that's on page 11 of that Lewis and Clark document you have. Again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, it's just news. I would caution the county of doing anything more than requiring a waiver until you're ready to actually take on those duties.
Okay. which I am not, because I would probably be staff that would have to do that until we established additional staff.
right?
So,
But that being said, as the county, Gallatin County and the Southern County and Jefferson County and that whole area to the south continues to grow, that might change in 2 years, 3 years, who knows?
right.
But probably not in that position right now, for sure.
Okay. So not something to add now, but something just to
Think
consider
about.
revisiting.
Mhm.
Okay.
So, remind me, does the county currently have the waiver of a right to protest in the current regulations?
Yeah, I
I
think
don't know if
we
it's in
do.
the regulations, but I know it's a condition of, or it's a commission required covenant,
Okay.
is how we
Well,
put it in there.
you might want to require the waiver as part of the regulations versus the actual creation, just so it's codified, so if someone says, well, why are you doing this? Well, it's in our regulations for these reasons. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yes. Is it in Richlands? Do you know off the top of your head? I can do a look also.
No, I don't specifically know off
Okay.
the top of my head.
That's all right.
I have both the Richlands here if you need them.
I have Richlands here as well.
But I'm gonna look, because I've got it in PDF, and I should have.
Oh, to do a search?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to know what it actually looks like.
And says there,
Yeah. Might be under certificates, maybe.
Now I'm scrolling through. So I don't see it in Richland. So
Okay.
Richland obviously mustn't have found that they needed that.
Okay.
And the reality is they probably aren't having the density of development, especially now with the decline in the block and that, obviously Lewis and Clark and or what Broadwater is probably gonna see in the future. So that, I would guess that's why they didn't require it.
Does Lewis and Clark have one?
Yeah, so if in Lewis and Clark regulations and the design and improvement standards on page, so it's section 11, page 11, number 7 in the middle, it says, all internal roads and streets within subdivisions shall be maintained by creating and properly funding rural improvement. And then the next paragraph says, in all subdivisions, property owners shall sign a waiver. I mean, that second paragraph makes sense. I just don't know that, as we talked about, the county wants to take on the creation of our IDs quite yet.
Okay. So I think it would be wise to include that waiver language in any way we can in the regulations.
Well, I agree. I don't think there's
Because if
any.
we don't have an explanation of what it is or why we're having you do this, we're just saying you're going to do it.
right,
You're going to sign this waiver. I think we need to explain ourselves.
Well, any reasonable person is going to, particularly if they're buying any subdivision, is going to understand they're new. And there's going to be more new people, and depending upon the impacts from all these people, you may have to pony up
Right,
your fair share.
right. Okay.
If they don't like it, they can go back where they came from.
I think we sort of said that in the Code of the West. I'm serious.
No, I
It
know.
is, yeah.
Except that's not law, that's just,
It was accepted by the county.
there was one,
And I don't know if the county's doing this, but some jurisdictions, on the face of final plat, they're putting a point-blank statement that the county is not responsible for road maintenance for whatever specific roads are applicable, because a plat might show a county road, but then you have the brand new internal roads, just so the county has the ability to say, you should have looked at the plat and talked to your realtor, so.
I'm still a fan of Richlands more so. I don't have Lewis and Clark here with me, but I have looked through Lewis and Clark and Gallatin. And I guess I'm wondering, I mean, if Richland is the version that's being recommended by our Mako land use attorney, is there a reason why we would want to look at Lewis and Clark or Gallatin? I mean, is it because those two are also modeled off of Richland? Is that why?
No, what I would say is that there may be elements of the design and improvement standards for, say, Gallatin, Lewis and Clark, Madison, Carbon, or other jurisdictions that you might want to use. For instance, the level of service discussion of proportional payment for roads, that's not in Richland County.
Right.
I just don't think it's, so you have the ability, I think, for lack of a better term, cut and paste and delete the things you like and don't like,
Okay.
especially in the design and improvement standard.
Yeah, I think we definitely want to put something in our regulations about proportionate share of roads. And I know I said that already, but it's such a
It's
big
just,
thing.
it's too big a hassle, and
Yep.
That was the main thing that precipitated us doing
Mhm.
this in the first place.
and essentially, this one has been tested. That's the only thing that I liked about it,
Which
is
one, Lewis and Clark?
Lewis and Clark.
I
Right.
like Gallatin's.
Yeah, I quit reading Gallatin's after a while. I turned my stomach.
I liked it because it was so simple, and that's me.
Now, there were certain things in there that I thought they were overreaching. So, I did read it.
Jenny's coming from, the hard part with roads is that, unfortunately, I don't think, short of true building permits and true impact fees, where, I'll be honest, I think that the most equitable way to deal with this issue is for every jurisdiction in the state to adopt impact fees and have a building permit system, and that when you come in, if you live on River Road and you're gonna build a house, it's already figured out. You gotta pay this much for schools, roads, fire, write the check, build your house, off you go. So we're not sitting here from one jurisdiction to the other fighting about this and that, and they do it different, you do it different, but that's not gonna happen. So I guess where I'm going is I would agree with you, Jenny, that Gallatin's is probably simpler, but I think you want, even though Lewis and Clark may be a little more complex, I suspect it's probably more defensible right now. And boy, you're only going to see more subdivision development. So
Yeah, my general concept of this is that we want, the first requirement is that we have to meet MCA. And if there's something that you have seen that we haven't talked about, isn't in Richland, that's in the new ones, then we need your input on that. But the very first thing we do is make sure that it's 100% legal, that we're, because of changes. And after that, we keep it as simple as we can and still make it defensible for the county.
right. Well, and again, that's one of the reasons that I would recommend at least using the process and statutory sections of the Richland County document, because it does meet statute. And Tara is absolutely confident with all of that, so we're not going through and reinventing the wheel. That doesn't mean the planning board shouldn't ask questions and judge things at all. But from a statutory standpoint, I'm confident that the Richland template, the statutory stuff and the procedural things protect the county. I mean, there is a little bit of flexibility, but not a lot, and that's because the statute is pretty prescriptive. And then we get into the design and improvement standards. That's definitely where you have flexibility. The forms and supplements, you have flexibility. The review criteria for exemptions such as family gifts, ag covenants, that sort of stuff, you have that flexibility as long as there's a logical connection. So, you know, the design and improvement standards, the documents, the forms and applications, and then like the exemption stuff, you do have flexibility.
So what we could do is if we took Richland and started using it as a model, go through and anything we had questions or didn't like, we could all vote on whether to include it or take it out or alter it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do my, I mean, especially, I need to be the one who says, you can take that out, but you're gonna get into legal trouble if you do. Or if you're gonna do that, you might wanna nuance it this way. Just finished going through this very process with Prairie County, and Tara DePew sat down with the planning board, and I'll be honest, the planning board there deleted a lot of stuff that Tara was not happy about, but they're also not, if they see one subdivision a year, if they're lucky. They could still get sued, but their odds are much less than the situation that Broadwater, Gallatin, and Lewis and Clark are in, because you're gonna be under pretty immense pressure. So I guess where I'm going, Jenny, is you can certainly identify areas you don't like, and we can have a discussion about whether or not you want to delete them or alter them. I'll just try to do my best to give you the perspective of does this create legal liability for the county if you do that?
My one, I'll just put it flat out, my one thing about, like here, the 2,000 feet horizontal and all that's in here, my whole philosophy on subdivisions is when somebody walks in that door to submit a subdivision, we don't look at them as a crook. They're trying to cheat us. We want to work with them. I don't like it that we're looking at them that they're going to get us yet, but we're not going to let them. And that's how I feel about it. I think that's my number one objection to a lot of the regs. And I think, that's why I like may instead of shall.
So,
But I can take your guidance and understand, and not only that, take the experience you have from other counties on how it affected them and what we should look out for. I'm open for that, but I like that they're into, like right now with COVID, there's probably a few ranchers out there would like to make a one-lot subdivision to help get them through this situation, money-wise. I don't want them to come in the door feeling like they're begging us to let us please let them get a one-lot subdivision through to